Kerry, you've just been to Geneva.
Yes, I have. It was wonderful. I had about 2 weeks ago, I went over as part of the Associated Countrywomen of the World United Nations Committee, which I'm through on that because of our affiliation with Rural Women New Zealand. We're affiliated, and that gives us that voice at the United Nations on behalf of women around the world. And went to Geneva to attend the meeting of Child Rights Connect, which is a global alliance of non-government organisations, or NGOs, who are all focused on addressing and implementing and making governments accountable for ensuring they address child rights, the rights of the child, which are stipulated in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I also had a meeting while I was there with the director of the Health Promotion Unit at the World Health Organization, WHO, and we talked again about what their focus is for health promotion throughout the world. And it was really good to see how they interconnected. And much of child rights is around those basic human rights from a child perspective. You know, the rights to health services, the rights to education, freedom from abuse, freedom from violence, the right of clean, fresh drinking water. But also a really interesting one about the right to access your sense of belonging in terms of who you are, your culture, your heritage, really an important right for children. And we see that a lot of abuse of that, and currently in things like the refugee camps, where children their births aren't being registered, so they have no country of state, so they're quite disconnected from who they are and where they fit in the scheme of things. And to talk with the World Health Organization about the work they're doing with governments around health promotion. And they're moving their focus a little bit away from specific diseases. They're still focusing on those, but their main focus now is on the social determinants of health. And that's things like addressing poverty, health and education, and general access to services, clean health, drinking water, and dealing with violence and abuse, and all those issues that make up a person's health and well-being. And so this was really quite a good connection between that and the child rights work and how that all works together. And when we bring that back into the New Zealand context, we're sort of like, what are the abuses on child rights here and social determinants? And we see that we still have issues around poverty, and some of our rural communities are particularly bad. If we look in the Northland areas and throughout New Zealand, there are areas that have really bad poverty. Okay, yes, it's not the same as what you might see in Africa, but in the context of New Zealand society and New Zealand economy, yes, we have some quite bad poverty. And if you address issues like poverty, you address access to health services, good education, you're actually addressing the health and well-being of the people. And once you've addressed that, you actually start to see them develop better. And this was something that was discussed quite a lot at the Rural Women New Zealand conference last November, and we've been talking with government since that around how do we as a society and a government make sure that we look after the health and well-being of our people. And one of the key movements throughout the world now is something they call health in all policies, and it's around making sure that all government policy has at its core the health of the people. So if the policy isn't good for the people, why are we doing it? Because the key being that if the people are healthy and in good space, good mental health, there's no violence, no crime, well, limited numbers, then they're actually healthier as a population, and when they're healthier, they're actually more productive. So you have that spin-off into better economic development and growth. So if you centre everything back at health and well-being, you're actually doing a whole lot better for your country. So it was a really interesting discussion.
It would have been an amazing few days.
It was. And to see that that's now the focus from the World Health Organization is around those social determinants and bringing that through into government policy and encouraging governments to address those issues and making sure that they're looking at, particularly also the child rights work we were doing, is how governments inadvertently perhaps or through ignorance don't address the rights of children. And of course these are the next generations who are coming through to run our countries and be productive adults in the future. So we need to make sure we're giving them the very best start we can. And New Zealand does reasonably well, but there's a lot more we can do. There are things that we don't do that are really in contravention of those rights. For example, one of the simplest things is the Convention of the Rights of the Child defines a child as any young person under the age of 18. Now, yet in New Zealand, we use 16 as an age for changing to adulthood. When you look particularly at things like welfare benefits, they all cut at 16. We start trying our young people in the adults' legal system from the time they're 16 and 17, and yet technically under international law they're still children. And when you're putting young people at that age through an adult legal system and you're putting them in jail, you can't then expect them to come out with a better outcome than they went in with. So we've got to start looking at how we actually deal with our children if we're wanting to have better growth and development for the country in the future, for our future generations.
There's an old saying, isn't it? Give me a boy until he's 7 and I'll give you the man.
Absolutely. And it very much starts from dealing with children and issues around, all our issues around family abuse and child abuse. And globally, that also takes in things like child marriage and female mutilation and all those other issues that we do see pockets of it here. As we have this more multicultural society, we are seeing the odd pocket of it. So we need to look at how we address those issues and make sure that we're looking after our children properly.
Kerry, thank you very, very much indeed.